It's FYF Sports. This is Lamont, and we are back with another podcast episode. This is your number one and only daily commute show. This podcast was created to bring you news, sports, and information, however you want to describe it, but it's here to bring you this type of information to help you through your daily commute, whether you're traveling to work, whether you're on your break, whether you're stepping away and getting away from your kids. If you throw your headphones and you tune into FYF Sports, we got your back. We're not gonna give you long, drawn out episodes for hours and hours and hours. We know you guys are working people. This is your daily commute show. 20 to 30 minutes of us speaking on some of the hottest topics in sports, as we are going to do today here on FYF Sports. If you haven't done so, make sure you check us out on YouTube as well. Definitely subscribe, like, comment on the videos where we drop podcast episodes. We have lives that allow you, the fans, to come up on the panel and discuss these same topics with us. So again, we thank you guys for being here. But again, today we have to talk about WNBA star Brittney Griner. Everything that you need to know about WNBA star Brittney Griner, who is still in Russia in custody for criminal charges. Now, first thing we want to do before we actually talk about what we think is actually going on, we want to give you a brief overlay of what she's still locked up for and what the outcomes and potential outcomes could be if she's actually convicted of the crime. So as tensions between the US and Russia continue to rise, amid Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the American WNBA star Brittney Griner has been detained in Russia for months. Brittney Griner, she's a two-time Olympic gold medalist who plays for the Phoenix Mercury in the WNBA, and she also plays for Russia's UMMC team during the offseason and was reportedly arrested on drug charges. Now, this was back in February after the Russian Customs Department found vape cartridges in her luggage at the airport. Now, U.S. officials met with Griner last month, and while a spokesman from the U.S. Embassy in Moscow said she was in good condition, it remains unclear whether she'll be released. And now a lot of people say, well, these are just vape cartridges. Well, we want everybody to understand she did not just have one or two of these cartridges. She had a suitcase full of them, enough to where they could label her a dealer, or she was going to be distributing them, not just using them. So I think maybe she would have been released if it was just maybe one or two cartridges and it looked like it was for personal use, but she had such a large amount of them. And there's a video on YouTube where you can clearly see the Russian customs pulling all of the cartridges out one by one. And it's not just a few, it's a lot of them. So very shocking to see that video. But Russia first announced the news March 6th, telling the world it had an American basketball player in custody. And then that player ended up being later identified as Griner. And the footage allegedly showed her being stopped by customs. And this was all released. This was actually reported first by the New York Times. Now, Russian law enforcement is saying Griner was found with vape cartridges containing hash oil and is reportedly opening a criminal case against her, looking at large-scale transportation of drugs. Now, as I mentioned before, a lot of people are thinking, oh, it's just vape cartridges. No, she had a lot on her, you guys. It wasn't just a small amount, and it was enough for the Russian government to consider it large-scale drug transportation. Now, after Russia announced Griner's arrest, her agent, Lindsay Colas, told ESPN they are in close contact with her, her legal representation in Russia, her family, her teams, and the WNBA and NBA. Now, Colas' statement continued. And this is what Colas stated. She says, as this is an ongoing legal matter, we are not able to comment further on the specifics of her case, but can confirm that as we work to get her home, her mental and physical health remain our primary concern. Now, Brittney Griner's wife, Sheremetyevo Griner, has spoken up, and she also released a statement on Instagram thanking all of the fans for their prayers and support, asking for privacy. Meanwhile, the WNBA is also releasing a statement offering Brittney Griner its full support and noting, they said, our main priority is her swift and safe return to the United States. And so the Phoenix Mercury and USA Basketball released similar statements on that as well. Now, Brittney Griner's arrest in Russia is especially troubling given her high profile status as an American athlete and her identity as an LGBTQ black woman. Now, Russian President Vladimir Putin has taken an active stance against LGBTQ rights, having declared in 2020 that he would never legalize same-sex marriages in his country. Now, the U.S. Secretary of State, his name is Anthony Blinken. He acknowledged Griner's arrest during a March 6th press conference, and he stated, whenever an American is detained anywhere in the world, we, of course, stand ready to provide, obviously assistance in any particular way, and that includes even in Russia. And now on March 16th, a Russian state news agency reported that a Moscow court had extended Griner's detention through May 19th, cutting into the start of the WNBA season. So while coordinated efforts to secure Griner's freedom have remained private to a certain degree, because some of the negotiations did get leaked, and we'll talk about that later, but a spokesman for the U.S. State Department claims the department has been doing everything that we can, and that's exactly how they worded it. They said they're doing everything we can to support Griner and work towards her safe release. Okay, so let's move along further. On March 23rd, consular officials reportedly visited Griner in her cell that she shares with two other Russian inmates. And at a press conference following the visit, the U.S. Embassy spokesperson Jennifer Palmer reiterated that the embassy was doing everything it could to see to Griner's release and ensure she is treated fairly throughout this ordeal. Now, while government officials are choosing to work quietly on Griner's case for fear that over publicizing it will adversely affect her detention, many of Griner's supporters have been outraged that the government isn't waging a louder campaign for her freedom. All right, as we progress on through this crazy timeline, on April 28th, the Biden administration announced that Trevor Reed, a U.S. Marine veteran who had been detained in Russia since 2019, was released as a part of a prisoner swap between Russia and the U.S., renewing scrutiny of Griner's case. A source told ESPN that Griner's team saw Reed's release as an encouraging step towards the possibility of the White House negotiating a deal for her. Now, at the time, ESPN noted that the cases were substantially different and the road to Griner's release still could potentially be long. Now, Griner hasn't been formally charged or classified as a hostage by the State Department and could be detained for up to a year before her case even goes to trial. Her wife, Sheremetyevo Griner, again has taken to Instagram to celebrate Reed's release and express pain over her wife's continued detention. And she stated again on Instagram, as I do everything in my power to get BG home, my heart is overflowing with joy for the Reed family. And that's what she wrote in support of Trevor Reed. And she says, I do not personally know them, but I know the pain of having your loved one detained in a foreign country. That level of pain is constant and can only be remedied by a safe return home. So less than a week after Reed's release, the U.S. State Department then changed its stance on Brittney Griner, officially labeling her as wrongfully detained by Russia on May 3rd. And this is per NPR. This change is an official language This language will simply allow the U.S. to actively begin negotiating for her release without waiting for the Russian legal system to take her case to trial and then deliver a verdict. So the U.S. government will continue to provide appropriate consular support to Brittney Griner and her wife. And the State Department has also said in another statement, and also Griner's agent, Lindsay Colas, again said that also released a statement following this shift, saying our expectation is that the White House, and this is similar to the State Department, they both saying that the White House will do whatever is necessary to bring Brittney Griner back home. And now the most recent news was on May 13th, where Griner's lawyer told the Associated Press that Russian authorities had extended her pretrial detention by a month, which he believes could mean Griner's case will come to trial sooner than later. And a handcuffed Griner was pictured leaving the courtroom in a city outside of Moscow, holding her head low under a red hoodie. And speaking to her welfare, Griner's lawyer told the AP that her legal team did not receive any complaint about the detention conditions from her client. So Brittney Griner, American basketball star who plays in the WNBA, detained in Russia, and news was leaked. There was information leaked about a possible trade offer proposed by the Russian government and Vladimir Putin, and they asked for a war criminal who was named the Merchant of Death. He sold over 15,000 weapons to countries that wanted to combat against the United States, and he is documented on record for having killed multiple U.S. representatives. He is, in fact, an assassin. And they basically were telling the U.S., and this was leaked, so don't take this as fact, but it was leaked that the Russian government wants the Merchant of Death in exchange for Brittney Griner, and the U.S. government feels that's too steep of a price to pay for Brittney Griner. Now, you guys are free to give your thoughts on this. I love talking about these types of topics. The one thing that's alarming about this case is the disregard for a person. You know, I want to say that she did get caught with drugs. That's undoubted. That's not something that we can question. It was caught on video. Russian customs found it. She was caught with a very large amount of drugs. Had she been caught with illegal drugs in a large quantity here in the United States, she would be locked up. She would potentially be able to get some type of bond, but she would be facing a lengthy jail sentence had she done the same thing here in the United States. And the State Department, the WNBA, the NBA, no one would be able to use outside support to get her out of that trouble. I want to know why, when people commit crimes outside of the United States, do we feel they should simply be pardoned for those particular crimes because they're not from that country and simply allowed back to the U.S. without penalty? And we have one of the most corrupt penal systems here in the United States, where we lock people up in masses, where we have a bond system that only favors people with funds and money, where we have a legal representation system to provide people who don't have the funds to pay for expensive attorneys. They're provided with very, very poor representation in public defenders that essentially puts them in a worse situation financially, because many times they're put on probation or house arrest, or they're given fines, and they're already in poor, poverty-stricken, desolate situations, and they can't afford it. So they're put in crazier situations because the government's trying to extract more money out of them. And a lot of these people are in prison or in jail or committed crimes because they needed money. I think it's very hypocritical for the U.S. government to cry for her release when there are literally thousands and thousands of U.S. citizens locked up for very, very minor to minute crimes. And they're stuck in jail because they don't have the money to pay bonds to get out. Some people can sit in county jails for a year to 2 years on very minor, on misdemeanor charges or very petty felonies. We're talking about possession, things where people need help. So again, I want to try to be understanding to Brittney Griner's situation. But it's hard to be understanding to Brittney Griner's situation when she, who's clearly guilty of committing a crime that if it was committed here in the U.S., she would be facing a lot of jail time. Why is it not okay for the Russian government to penalize her for committing a crime over in their country? And when you look to the amount that she was bringing from Russia and attempting to bring into the U.S., I don't know if this is the first time she's done it. Her attorney said that this is not a case that she wants to really talk about. A lot of times when cops detain you, they ask you, have you done this before? How much did you bring through in the past? Did she admit to doing this before? Did she admit to bringing through similar amounts in the past? I don't know. But when you go into another country, you have to be mindful of their rules and regulations, especially when you're going to that country to earn a wage that in the U.S., the WNBA is not even willing to pay her. She was only in Russia because the WNBA, a league that's failing, refuses to do what is necessary to allow their league to operate in a more profitable manner. They don't market their league properly. They don't market the players properly. They don't sell the product to men, sports fans. They don't sell a product that these fans want to see. They would much rather sell the LGBTQ plus movement as opposed to selling the sports. So I think all of this is a culmination that all can get reflected back on Brittney Griner as a person and the WNBA for even allowing their players to be in a situation where they have to choose between playing in the WNBA and going overseas to earn additional revenue, because the WNBA does not pay a very good wage in comparison to other sports. So again, you guys, let me know what you think about this situation. I'm really curious to hear what you guys have to say in the comments. But I just think it's very funny how we are willing to call for the release of a Brittney Griner who was caught dead to rights with a ton of drugs in another country. And we have innocent men and women locked up. And not just innocent men and women locked up. I mean, when you look to Kamala Harris, who was found to have looked over evidence that could have freed people just to get guilty pleas or convictions and to raise their conviction rate so she can get to a higher political position. When we look to those types of situations, when we look to how Maya Moore gave up her career in the WNBA to assist in the criminal the criminal case of her now husband, who was wrongfully convicted, and she helped get his conviction overturned and him released, but no one was there to support her. Where is the support for the people that are here in the United States facing similar situations? The same situation that Russia has Brittney Griner in. There are a lot of U.S. citizens detained in county jails, prisons across the country, innocent, and no one's pushing for their release. Hey, this is FYF Sports, man. We try to bring these topics to you guys from an unbiased perspective. We try to bring them to you in an angle that allows you to think. And similar to this Brittney Griner situation, I know it's very sensitive to a lot of people. I know it's very sensitive to a lot of communities. So it's not our intent to offend, but to make people think And I think with this Brittney Griner situation, to jump on the bandwagon and cheer for her release, it's easy to do. I think the hard thing to do is to sit back, look at her situation, and then really think long and hard on who really created this situation. Is it because Russia is a corrupt state with Vladimir Putin at its head, or is it because Brittney Griner was looking to transport a large amount of drugs from one country to another and potentially use her celebrity status to allow her to do so? But you guys, let me know what you think. It's FYF Sports. It's been another great podcast episode on your daily commute show. We will be back. As if you didn't know before, if you missed the previous couple of episodes, you may have heard Abel Mahari of Mahari Nation Sports Podcast. He will be joining FYF Sports on this platform as well to help bring you guys content. He will also be joining me on a few of these episodes. We can kind of go back and forth on some of these topics. But again, I want you guys to give a big shout out and salute to Abel Mahari. Go give him a quick follow and subscribe on YouTube as well, as he's really looking to build up that platform. But the brother is extremely smart. He's an Olympian, right? He's a champion. He's an ESPY award winner. Again, there's so much you can say about this guy. So he's highly educated, very, very articulate, and I love the takes that he has. So again, make sure you guys welcome him into the FYF Sports family with open arms. But it's FYF Sports. It's been another great podcast episode, your one and only daily commute show. We will be back with more sports and news. But until then, it's FYF Sports. And we are out.
Cyclops.